Good morning. Those of you who are visiting or new to us, my name is Billy. I wanted to notice a couple things. Last week I pointed out the second row from the front was empty, and now it's no longer empty, so thanks for those who sat there. For those of you who have trouble coming in and finding spots, so you'll notice that around me there's a bubble, and around my wife, it's actually not true. There isn't a gap, a thing there that stops you from sitting there. If you want to sit behind us or in front of us, go ahead and do that. I want to start this morning just by together settling ourselves with a simple prayer. Go a couple more there, Leanne. And we call this a breath prayer. Breath prayer is intended to just go with your breath, so in and out. We're going to pray this a couple times. You might need this one as we get through the rest of the morning. So start with this. Inhale. Generous God, give me your wisdom. And inhale. Generous God, give me your wisdom. That's it. You might need that this week and this morning. You and I live in a culture that is filled with words and voices. From the time our kids can talk, we coach them in this kind of way. We say things like, you need to find your voice. You need to speak your truth. You need to use your platform. Because in our world, your voice isn't just what you say anymore. It's become who you are. It's your brand. It's your identity. And we build it with words, with posts, with comments, with texts. Every word adds another chapter to the public story that you and I are broadcasting to the world. So our words these days don't just communicate, they perform. And we've never had more power than we have today to speak. Social media has given each of us a massive microphone to magnify our voices. You can get up in the morning and broadcast your thoughts to hundreds or thousands or even millions before you've even finished your morning coffee. And yet, for all the power and the freedom that gives us with our voices, something about it isn't working, right? We're not gentler. We're not more at peace. We're louder, but we're not happier, and we're not wiser. If anything, our amplified voices have made us more tired, more anxious, and more wounded. We're connected to more people than ever before, but many of us feel increasingly alone. And we overanalyze every word from others for the worst possible implications, but then we send our own words out without much thought. And we mistake volume of words for confidence, reactions for thought, and hot takes for wisdom. And our words do a lot of damage, don't they? A text that can end a friendship, a comment that ignites a family conflict, gossip that quietly reshapes your workplace or your church, a sharp word at home that lingers long after it's spoken, maybe a sarcastic jab that lands harder than we intended, or did we? T.S. Eliot wrote, "Words strain, crack, and sometimes break, slip, slide, perish, will not stay in place." And that's where we are. We're all holding lit matches in a dry forest, and we wonder why everybody keeps catching on fire. And today, into all of the noise and clutter of all these voices, we land in James chapter 3, which begins this way: "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters." That's fairly encouraging for the preacher to start on that note. One of my favorite verses, because my words are quite literally my work. And James opens by saying that my work is dangerous. So I don't want to start there. I want to walk through this chapter backwards, actually. I want to begin with the solution, and then the symptom, and then the disease, and finally arrive at this warning again. Because this isn't a chapter or a concept that is new to us. So before we feel what seems to be the impossible full weight of the problem, I think we need to see that there's hope. So, in the spirit of James 3, I'm going to practice a little restraint this morning, and I'm going to, usually I preach for about 30 minutes. Today I'm aiming closer to 20. That's a reduction of about a third, which feels appropriate for a sermon about controlling the tongue. You're welcome for that. And with that extra few minutes that you don't have to run anywhere because you've already allotted, we hope that you won't rush off, but you'll stay for our short general meeting. And then you can see the accountants go to work, and they are also important. Here's the idea that holds the whole chapter together, I think. That what comes out of your mouth reveals what's in your heart. What comes out of your mouth reveals what's in your heart. So I want to begin at the end of the chapter in verse 13, as Brenda read for us, with this deceptively simple question. Who is wise and knowledgeable among you? And then James says there are two kinds of wisdom. Not good words and bad words, but really two operating systems. Because James doesn't define wisdom by intelligence or education or eloquence. Wisdom shows up in the way that you live. And so he says, show by your good life that your works are done with gentleness born of wisdom. Beneath the way that we live, there are two possible and very different sources. The first one, James calls earthly, unspiritual. Translation here is devilish. Strong words. But he says this wisdom is driven by bitter envy and selfish ambition. In other words, it runs on the anxious, the hungry self. And its constant questions are familiar probably to us, like, how do I get ahead? And how do I protect my image? How do I, in the words of our Twitter world, win? So much winning. This kind of wisdom is competitive, transactional. It has what we call zero sum. That is, somebody has to lose and somebody has to win, and the loser won't be me. Somebody else's gain feels like my loss. And James traces its origin all the way back, and you'll hear the hints, perhaps, of Genesis chapter 3, because it echoes the voice of the accuser, the one we call Satan. This kind of wisdom is demonic, he says, and its results prove it. There's disorder and wickedness of every kind. There's chaos. There's fragmentation. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's the kind of voice that fills our social media feeds, our workplaces, sometimes our homes, and sometimes our own minds. And you and I don't have to imagine what that looks like, because we know what it looks like, don't we? Think about the last online argument that you witnessed, or perhaps participated in. Think about the tone of our politicians. Think about how easily we speak about people we've never actually met. Disorder follows earthly wisdom like smoke follows fire. But James says there's another kind of wisdom, the wisdom from above, the wisdom that comes from God. The wisdom from above is first pure and then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits without a trace of partiality or hypocrisy. And you're probably hearing words that we've heard in other chapters in James as we read those, because James is sort of spiraling threads all throughout his chapters. So pure. Remember chapter 1 talking about the heart that is divided? This heart is pure and undivided. It is oriented fully toward God. And from that purity flows peace and gentleness, and this phrase, willingness to yield. It is full of mercy and good fruits. In other words, the fruit grows from the root. And when that kind of wisdom runs your heart, then what happens? The fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So here's what this means, that everything that comes out of your mouth, your tone with your children, your critique of a coworker, your encouragement of a friend, your online presence, all of it is fruit. And fruit always tells the truth about the tree. Your voice, James is claiming, is not generating content on its own. It's broadcasting whatever wisdom is operating your heart. So if peace is the source of your words, you get peace. Or perhaps is your fruit chaos and hurt? So let's go back a little further. See what James writes in verse 9. With the tongue, we bless our Lord and Father, and with it, we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. We don't need to have James explain this very much, do we? Because we already know it. We can sing with gusto here on Sunday morning, and then on the way out to the parking lot, we can cut someone down. We post a Bible verse about love on our social media, and then 10 minutes later, we fire off a sharp, dismissive comment online. We talk about grace in public, and we practice sarcasm in private. James says we bless God and curse people made in his image. Same mouth, same day, different words. And you hear James's response fairly clearly, my brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. This is not the way that the Christian life is supposed to work, because springs don't produce fresh water and salt water from the same opening. Fig trees don't bear olives. These are natural impossibilities, but too often our words and our heart are our reality, and they don't match up. James is saying that the ambiguity in our speech isn't just a minor failure. It's actually a massive warning light. It signals a divided heart that's trying to run two opposing systems of wisdom at the same time. And this should remind you of the divided heart of chapter 1. Because your mouth is trying to tell you something. The question is, are we listening? So let's go back further to verses 3 to 8, where James explains why this problem cannot be solved with better technique. The tongue, he says, is small but powerful. Like a bit in a horse's mouth, like a rudder on a ship, tiny things that steer enormous forces. The tongue is a small organ but has enormous influence. And then he doubles down at his next image. He says, the tongue is fire. One careless word, piece of gossip or contempt or cruelty, and we know this, it can ignite destruction far beyond what we intended. And James is unflinching here. He says this fire is set on fire by hell. In other words, our words are not just about poor communication. This is spiritual warfare. When our speech is sourced in earthly wisdom, it becomes a conduit for destructive power. And then comes verse 7. People can tame all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and fish, but no one can tame the tongue. Hasn't tried hard enough, hasn't found the right technique, hasn't produced or practiced enough, cannot. We've tamed animals, we've engineered systems, we've mastered technologies, but not this thing we call the tongue. In other words, we don't need just better habits and more willpower. James says we can't do it because the problem is really not the tongue. It's our hearts. The poet Ben Okri captures what James is describing, and it's a fairly long quote, but I think it describes it well. It sometimes seems to me that our days are poisoned with too many words said and not meant. words said and meant, words divorced from feeling, wounding words, words that conceal, words that reduce, dead words. The world is drowning in words. There's hardly a corner of the world or of the mind that hasn't been inundated with words. We are being spoken to death. And yet we use them with such deadly and accurate cruelty, the cruelty of those who know their words have power, but not goodness, influence, but not integrity. We are being poisoned by words. Our days are poisoned. Our relationships are poisoned. Until we learn again to speak with purity, with truth, with reverence, we will continue to murder each other, not with guns, but with syllables. And so now we come back to the beginning. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. Obviously, this is personal for me because that's what I am. I am a teacher. My words are my work. And I spend a lot of time with words, both spoken and written. Every week I stand here and I use words to point people towards God, hopefully, and his kingdom. And James begins this chapter by reminding me and anyone who teaches that words carry weight, that responsibility grows with influence, because a teacher's voice has a bigger rudder. It provokes a larger spark. But lest you think that James is just talking about me, notice what James says next. For we all stumble in many ways. James includes himself, but this isn't just a warning for pastors or preachers. It's for parents and leaders and managers and friends and people. For all of us, anyone who speaks or writes words. So what do? Perhaps we should just shut up. And that's good advice for a lot of our interactions. But it's not practical long term, especially for a preacher. Certainly we can work on what we talked about a couple weeks ago, and we can increase the gap between the stimulus and response, between our thoughts and our words. But it's not going to be enough, not if the source of those words is not transformed. So again, what can we do? And so I think we go back to chapter 1. If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. That's not a theory for me. That's survival. I ask for wisdom every week. In fact, I depend on it. Otherwise, this doesn't work at all. So, in summary, James dismantles the illusion that we can master our words on our own, because we cannot tame our tongues. But he doesn't leave us there, because God offers what we cannot produce: wisdom from above, hearts that are reoriented, voices that are redeemed. The path forward with dealing with our tongue is not trying harder, it's asking more. It's the posture of that breath prayer that we began with this morning. So, before you use your voice this week, before you text or post or react, pause and ask yourself, where is this coming from? Which wisdom is running my heart right now? Listen to your voice. It will tell you the truth about your heart. And then ask the God who is good for what he promises to give generously: wisdom. And so let's end with the same prayer that we began with this morning. Generous God, give me wisdom. Generous God, give us your wisdom.
So I just want to give context here. The purpose of this meeting is to satisfy the laws of Alberta. Okay? If you want the honest truth, that's actually what we're doing. So because we're a registered charity, we also have to follow the laws of the province that we're in, and because we're a registered charity, we follow the laws of Alberta so we can satisfy the charity laws from Revenue Canada as well. However, having said that, this is a lot more about stewardship and what we're doing with the blessings that God has given us. And so this is our agenda. Steve's going to review last year. Billy's going to review some of the upcoming church building projects. David's going to go over the budget for next year, and then I'm going to come back. We just have a couple of motions that we need to do as it relates to the officers of the charity. So with that, I'll call on Steve.
Thanks, Ron. Morning, everybody. You might be thinking after this meeting that Billy should have also mentioned that words can be boring. But we hope that's not the case. We'll try to keep this, be bold, be brief, and be gone, as the saying goes. I do think, though, it's important that we as a church spend time, as Ron mentioned, around stewardship. And the Bible teaches that we all have a responsibility to be good stewards of that God's entrusted with us. And that goes for us individually, but also collectively as a church. So I think there's a responsibility as we as members have to be aware of what's going on, and also as church leaders to report back to the congregation on what's been happening financially. So we could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Just a brief word on our finance committee. I just like to put this slide up because the people that serve on the finance committee, they're kind of under the radar, I would say, and you don't see what they're doing a lot of times here on Sundays, especially. Maybe Shane when you see him counting in the office there afterwards, but just briefly, these are the members of our finance committee. Brenham Monstenbrink. Brenham does a lot of work managing our payroll for the staff, and also with tax compliance and Revenue Canada reporting issues. Shane, he's our master of collections, and so he's constantly tracking all that information and reconciling numbers, and does a great job of that. David Ostenbrink, he'll be up here in a moment just to walk you through the budget. David always does a great job with us going through and doing a good financial plan. I serve as treasurer. Ron talked about officers. The treasurer is one of those roles that we have in the church. I keep all these guys in line that you see on the page here. And Billy's also a member of our finance committee. Billy does a lot of stuff in the background too in the finances, but also manages all our the payments we make to vendors and employee expenses and things like that. He's always looking after those things. So that's just a brief overview. There's a lot of other things that I won't get into, but thank you to all these folks who serve on this committee. Next slide, please. All right, so just on the left-hand side of the slide there, it's just a chart sort of showing our trend on the collections. So in the most recent year, 2025, we ended the year with general contributions. These are contributions that aren't allocated to any specific purpose other than just the general church treasury. 492,000 was the total there. That was about 1.6% above the year previous, and about 99% of the budget. So I think we can feel good about that, and we can feel that God's continuing to bless this congregation with faithful contributors and support. That 492,000 does not include the special contribution that we took up earlier in the year for the bathroom renovations. I would just say that while we got very close to our budget, we kind of struggled through the year trying to get there, and as we got later into the year, we were starting to fall behind. And if it wasn't for, a select few that actually, upped their giving or made some additional contributions, I don't think we would have got that close to the budget. And part of the issue is just that when we planned an increase in our budget over prior years, we didn't see sort of an equivalent uplift in a lot of individual members increasing their contributions over the previous year. So I would just take that opportunity right now, being it's early in the year, to remind you that we do have ways to electronically schedule your giving, either through pre-authorized deposit or electronic funds transfer. If you do and plan to increase your giving this year, you just haven't got around to it, it's really helpful if you do that now rather than later. And in terms of the PAD forms, the pre-authorized ones, you can just on our website, if you go to the upper right-hand corner, there's a giving button, and you can just email that form to giving@calgarycoc.com. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I didn't talk to the one on the right there. If we could just stay there for a moment. So this other slide here is just it's the distribution curve of the contributions. So if you take the top 100 givers or families in the congregation, that accounts for all of the giving. And so this is just broken down into 10% tiers. And you can see there that the distribution is similar to what it's been the last 3 years. Essentially, we've got 10%, the top 10% tier supports about 40% of the total general giving. And then if we go up to the top 40% of givers, that represents about 80% of the total funds collected. So we still have a strong concentration in that first 10 or 20% tier of giving. And while we appreciate the members that are doing that, we can't always rely on that. Many of the people in those tiers are graying and either retired or soon in retirement, and we just can't always count on that level of giving from that group. So the hope and the prayer here is that we can start to change this distribution to be a little more even through the other the rest of the giving groups. All right, we can go on to the next slide. Just wanted to talk about missions. To me, this is the most exciting part of the presentation, the work that we've been able to administer and fund through this congregation. We funded $143,000 of missions programs through the church this year. The first two columns there, well, the chart is showing our sources of funds, and then on the right is the uses of those funds. So the sources of that $144,000 come from individual giving, which is directed giving towards missions, either a specific mission or to general missions that the church can then be free to allocate. The missions committee can determine how to allocate those funds. And then there was $73,000 that came in through what we call charities, and these would be other churches like the Delta Church of Christ out in Vancouver, or the Parkway Church of Christ down in the States. Those two columns there, the first two, represent $130,000, and if you just remember that number, because when we just look at the revenue statement, you'll see that $130,000 on there, but that's where these funds are coming from. And then the church-funded piece there, the third column that makes up the $143,000, is just where the church has actually transferred funds from its general giving contributions and directed those towards missions. So where do we distribute those monies? We've got 8 different missions that we support. 5 of them are larger ones, which I just comment on briefly. Vancouver Island, this is to support Jennifer and Derek King and their disciple-making efforts out on Vancouver Island with regard to church planning and evangelism. This is largely flow-through money for Derek and Jennifer from those other charities. The our role as a church is to basically support them administratively, and they're on our church payroll, and we look after them in terms of supporting them in Canada as an organization. We have Ukraine, second on the list here. We support several UBI graduates from the UBI school in Ukraine, and these graduates are out doing evangelistic outreach work as well as humanitarian support, be it with orphanages or rehab centers. Some really good work going on there, but $37,000 went towards the efforts in Ukraine. Zimbabwe, $19,000. That was for the work that supporting Valapi and everyone that works with him in Zimbabwe. There's a lot of evangelism work going on there. It's actually amazing if you read about the numbers that he reports back to us on. Church planning, training of students that are involved in the World Bible School there. So really encouraging work going on in Zimbabwe that we support. One Kingdom, this is a European-based gospel ministry. We support Brandon Zorn, who's a nephew of Gary's, if you don't know him. He and his family are based in Budapest right now, and essentially this organization is seeking to identify seekers, spiritual seekers online, and trying to connect them with local churches and believers. We support that work to about $17,000. And then last one I just mentioned here is Regina. This is the General Roads Church of Christ. And they're based in an inner city area in Regina, and Kevin Vance leads that church there, and they're doing a great work, and we support them about $11,000 as of last year. All right, next slide, please. So just briefly looking at our revenue then, we talked about the $492,000 on the contribution slide a few moments ago, and then also that $130,000 I mentioned on the missions contributions. I just skip down to rental income, because that's a big line on here, $78,000, and we have several church communities that rent our building. The biggest one being the Every Nations Church, and they support about $64,000 of that $78,000 comes from them. The next biggest one would be the Spanish Church that you may also be aware uses our building. That was about $7,500. But what's interesting is if you look at the way that's grown from the previous year, which was only $47,000, and I think we've just been trying to charge, I guess, more appropriate rental fees for these folks that are using our building. So, while maybe a little bit of an inconvenience at times, and you wonder, well, why are we, having these other groups in our building? Financially speaking, it does help us absorb a lot of our fixed building costs. Just keep that in mind, I guess, when you see them maybe using our building. And then lastly, just our investment income I'd mentioned. We do have investments at the bank and secured GIC types of investments, and those are earning us some interest income. That was about $10,000. So total revenues were $723,000 last year. Just move over to the next slide, the expenses. So we had a total of $652,000 in expenses. If you deduct that from the revenues in the previous slide, that leaves us with a surplus of $71,000 for the year versus we budgeted a break even. The biggest expense we have are salaries and benefits for our staff. Those were down a little bit over where we budgeted, just due to the fact that we had Janessa, our church administrator, leave us midway through the year, and we also had a little bit of contingency built into that budget that we didn't use. Business operations, when we talk about that, we're just talking about things like utilities and insurance, cleaning and maintenance, professional fees. That was $170,000 last year. The number's big over the previous year, mainly because it included some maintenance item things like the new projector system, upgrades and repairs to the fencing around the building, and some parking lot maintenance. And Billy will just have a few more words to say about what's going on with the building operations and maintenance later. We did, you're aware too, we did upgrade and renovate the bathrooms about a year ago. The total price tag on that was about $57,000. It's not included in here. We treated that as a capital expense item, which just means that we don't charge it as a period cost in our profit and loss statement. We capitalize that and keep it on the balance sheet. But just so you know, we did incur that. That came out of our cash flow last year. Yeah, so I just, going back to the surplus then of $71,000, essentially we ran the surplus just because of additional rental income that we received over what we had budgeted, and some savings on the salaries, and underspending on some of our buildings and grounds maintenance expenditures. Next slide. Okay, this is just a look at our cash position. So we ended the year with our cash at bank and investments of about $519,000. That was a $11,000 decrease from the previous year. And at the bottom there, you can just kind of see the cash movements that caused that $11,000 decrease. We start with the surplus that we had in our budget. So we took in, inflows were $71,000 higher than outflows. To that, we deduct the capital expenditures we had, mainly for the bathrooms. We did increase some of our prepaid expenditures for some upcoming projects where we had to advance some money, which Billy will talk about. And then just a drawdown of some of our payables of $7,000. So overall change in cash was $11,000. And that is all I had to do on the look back to last year. Billy's the meat and the sandwich here, so I'm the first part, and then Billy, and then David's going to come up after Billy and talk about the look forward in the budget. So, thanks, Billy.
Okay, Jonathan mentioned that when we look at our budget, that helps us to say what our priorities are. And so when you look at last year, obviously the bathrooms, everybody was excited about that. Notice that we raised, we took a collection that was about $17,000 and the bathroom was $57,000. So just so you have awareness of, we weren't close to raising all we needed for that. That's why we took the money out of savings. Last year we also, it feels like longer than that, changed the projector system. We had fencing and repairs, we did maintenance to the parking lot. All of those things are intended to make our space feel safe and comfortable and welcoming for people. That's why we spend money on it. That's why we spend money cleaning, all of those things. So some of the things that are in 2026 are things that are started. So one of them would be up there, where we've got new windows and screens on there right now. So that work is just now completed. We always have to be repairing the roof constantly, and you'll see on the top right there that at some point, I hope that this is a pessimistic vision of how much money, how soon we're going to have to repair the roof, but it's going to be around $225,000, probably get more by the time we get there. So we have to kind of be ready for that. Things that you're going to see this year are some improvements to the exterior lighting, and we're going to try to make a southeast fence. So last year I had a dream that we could make our road around, all the way around. That proved to be completely economically unfeasible, like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So Instead, we've pivoted and we're hoping to put a solid fence there that will help to reduce how much drug trafficking happens right there, actually. Shortly, you'll see that we're going to replace the north door, and one of the reasons for that is that I'm tired of spending money to fix it. But more importantly, I'm hoping to create a better access so that we can have card access to the building, so that our rentals and things like that I can control better. And when someone comes and they can't get in and I'm half an hour away, I can just click a button. That's my dream. We'll see how that works out. But that door will be coming, I think, in the next month or so. In order to do that, then we'll spend money on the security system that goes with that door. And then there's the sign. So lots of these projects are Odell and me projects, so just keep that in mind. We had decided that sign, there's nothing we can do. I'm hoping that actually we can. But it is a dangerous sign, especially in the winter, to replace, which is why Christmas stayed on there until last week, if you were wondering. So it's dangerous, but it's very, very expensive to replace. I'm hoping that we can land in the $25,000 to $30,000 category there. So we will continue to see spending, and that spending will come from savings in some ways. And the reason we're doing that is so that our building can last longer and bring more people in. Dave?
All right. Good morning, congregation. Thank you, Steve, for going over the financial results from 2025, as well as Billy for going over some of those church projects that we have planned for this coming year, and for introducing some of the capital projects that may just take a little bit longer over the next coming years. We would first like to thank the congregation for their faithful giving to the church over this past year. Without these contributions, there's no way we can make the impact that we have both within our community in Marlborough, around the world through the support of various missions and missionaries, and through supporting our own church community, both socially and spiritually. So the process for compiling the 2026 budget for this year consisted of the following steps. First, inputs are requested from various committees and church ministry leaders. A draft budget is then prepared within the finance committee, where these inputs that are provided above are taken into consideration. There's then a formal review process where that budget is reviewed internally within the finance committee and then presented to the elders for their final approval. And lastly, we have where we are today, where we are presenting the budget here at the AGM. Now for the missions for this year, to take a closer look at the various missions that we will be continuing to support in 2026. Of the cash inflows that we are budgeting for 2026, 37% are expected to come from individual contributions. 45% are expected to come from those contributions from other charity, whether it be the church down in California or the Delta Church of Christ. And 18% are expected to come from our general church allocated funds. Of the budgeted cash outflows of roughly $139,000, we will continue to support $57,000 to be sent to Derek and Jennifer King on Vancouver Island as they continue their work there, which is a slight increase from last year. $34,000 is again budgeted to be sent to Ukraine for the UBI there, for the missionaries doing work there, both within the church community and just humanitarian support as well. $19,000 will again be sent to Zimbabwe, which is consistent with prior years. $16,000 again to the One Kingdom mission, which we started supporting over the last year or two. $9,000 again will go to that Regina inner city church there to help support them, and then some small amounts also to Zambia and Kenya as well. Now moving on to the revenue for 2026. In order to have a balanced budget for 2026, we need to have an increase of approximately $8,000 or 2% in general contributions. We are budgeting for mission contributions to be slightly less this past year, as there were some one-time contributions that were made this past year that we can't expect to have that every single year. So we're keeping that $115,000, consistent with previous years. For rent income, we are budgeting for a slight increase from $78,000 to $82,000 this year. This is just due to slight increases in the rent that is charged to the various churches and other communities that use our church building. For user fees, we're budgeting $4,000 for 2026. This is just for funds that the church collects from church members to just help cover some of the costs for church retreats, youth retreats, family camp, graduation banquet, just things like that, just to help cover some of those costs there. And then investment income, as mentioned by Steve, that's just for some of the interests that we're expected to earn on some of the GICs that we have. Just slight decrease just with us cashing out on some of them, as well as interest rates have gone down a little bit, so we're not receiving as much on those GICs. So in total, we're budgeting for a total income of $716,000, which is a slight decrease from last year's total income of $723,000. Now for the budgeted expenditures for 2026, just starting with salary and benefits, we just have a slight 1% increase from $288,000 to $293,000. This is just the net impact of us budgeting to be paying just for the 3 full-time ministers that we have here on staff, just with Janessa not being employed for a portion of the year, and there was just some wage increases throughout this past year, just with the remaining staff taking on some of those responsibilities, and just considering inflation as well. And then for business operations, we're budgeting for a fairly sizable 38% increase from $170,000 to $220,000. The bulk of it is for some of those building repairs and maintenance that Billy touched on earlier, but other things this includes is telephone, internet, utility bills, janitorial services, just with all the rental groups that use our building, just increased cleaning there. Kitchen supplies for services that we provide, like Wednesday lunches, and so on. Mission, I've already kind of gone through a breakdown already in the previous slide, but just to summarize, we're budgeting for missions expenses to be decreasing from $143 to $139. As mentioned earlier, the biggest cause for this decrease is just due to some one-time contributions that were received that we're not expecting to be paying out this year. For benevolence, we're budgeting for a $2,000 decrease from $10,000 to $8,000. This is just for the various compassionate programs that we run, such as the Wednesday lunches, stocking our food pantry, as well as some of the various special initiatives that we run for just community support within our community. Church operations, just a $9,000 increase from $21,000 to $30,000 when compared to the results from last year. What this includes is some of our various outreach ministries that we do. So this is like Stampede Breakfast, Christmas in Marlborough, and other outreach ministries that we do within our community. This also includes things such as ministerial expenses, training, education, and other resources. And then lastly, just various assembly materials, music licensing, online resources. So the biggest portion of this increase of the $9,000 is just there's going to be some modifying on the lights and sound system just to fix some of the current issues we're having there. And then we have our education ministries. We're budgeting for a $7,000 increase from $19,000 to $26,000. What this includes is things such as our youth group, young adults, children's ministries such as Sunday School, Spark. We also have like our men's retreats, women's retreats, seniors lunches, stuff like that. And this increase from last year is we've consistently kind of budgeted $30,000. It just doesn't seem to always get used. So we're really encouraging people to kind of use that men's ministry expenses that our budget that we do have available just for those men's retreats and stuff like that. So in summary, to get a balanced budget for 2026, we aim to have a total revenue of $716,000 with total expenditures of $716,000. In order to do this, we have to have general contributions to increase by roughly 2% to keep up with the increase in budgeted expenditures. These increases in budgeted expenditures are largely due to those capital projects that Billy touched on throughout the building and through outside. some additional church operation expenses that are needed to be completed, and then lastly, just to set aside a budget for various education ministries for the church. We also want to maintain a strong reserve amount for any surprise maintenance and repairs. As Billy kind of touched on, our roof is constantly kind of needing repairs, and it is eventually going to need to be replaced in the next 5 to 10 years. So we just want to keep that in mind, just to make sure we're keeping aside a good portion amount of that for that. So how do we get there? In 2025, our actual contributions were $492,000, and in order to have the balanced budget, we have to get to an increase of $8,000. In summary, if each member were to give an additional 75 cents per week, we can easily reach this target, which amounts to just less than a donut from Tim Hortons. However, with shifting demographics, as Steve mentioned, and inflation in mind, more is always helpful and appreciated. This past year, there was a strong push towards the end of the year in order to get our budget this past year, with November and December being our highest contribution months. We greatly appreciate this push, but it can make it difficult to kind of manage those expenses throughout the year. We encourage you, if you are able, to consider contributing throughout the year, just so we can continue to expect or have an idea of what to expect month to month, and so that we can continue to support our community and the missions we serve around the world, and to just grow spiritually as a congregation as well. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for either myself, Steve, or Billy with 2025, the building projects that we have, or this year's budget? Yes. So that's for like when we have like the church camp out that we always do, August long weekend, youth retreats, stuff like that. Sometimes we just charge a little bit for that to help cover some of those costs. So that's what that is for. So yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes, you can ask that. We don't go through every line item, but yes, if you have, like, if anyone's asking, like, hey, I'm wanting to do this thing, like this event with the young professionals, you can definitely ask either myself, Steve, Billy, like we would all have that information, so yes. Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's a form that you can like email Billy, and there's like a form that we can like send out, and like, I'm just wanting to update mine from X amount to X amount. So there's a form, and is it on the website as well too? Yeah. 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 I can't move it.
So there, James' question was around how do I increase my automatic giving? Billy seconds the motion. So these PADs, we call them pre-authorized deposits. There is if you go to the church website, giving@calgarycfc.com, or I'm sure, or you could ask someone in the finance committee or Billy for a copy of that form if you like to do it manually with a hard copy here. But you can find that there's a giving button on the upper right-hand corner, I believe, of the homepage of the church website. So you can download the form there. You just need to complete the relevant information and pass that into the church office. And that goes for if you're starting contributions or if you want to increase your contributions. We do need to have that information on file. It's better to have that for our own records than just an email, hey, Steve, hey, Billy, can you up my giving? So I appreciate the question. Thanks, James. Anything else? Okay, well, we hope we didn't bore you too much and appreciate your attention to all of that. Back to Ron. Yep.
Yeah, we just have a couple of formal things we actually have to do. And so it's been about 2 years since most of us were appointed. And so I'd like to get a motion to reaffirm, if you'd go back to that slide, please. Reaffirm myself, Miles, and Steve. And I have someone that said they would first that motion. Gary. Do we have a seconder for that? Wendy. So basically, that's reaffirming myself, Miles, and Steve as those positions. So all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. And then in addition, we're replacing the secretary. Carrie Clark has been doing that, and she's not interested in continuing that. So Billy has put his name forward. So if I could get a motion to appoint Billy to the position of secretary. Okay, so that's moved by Daryl, seconder. Yep, well, I'm blank for a name, but it's Andy. Andy Williams seconds that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, thank you for being part of this. Let me close in prayer. God, we just thank you for what you do for us. We thank you for blessing us. And God, in everything that we do, we want to bring honor and glory to your name. And we ask your blessings on our congregation as we strive to do that. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. You're dismissed.